want to do all this again. I want to do this all again. Good morning, Fab fam. This is Vinny B with Dead on Board Gaming, and this is another Flesh and Blood discussion video. We're a little late this week, as I usually do these on Monday, but I was waiting for the results of the calling. I was having a hard time finding them. Once I found them, I realized I didn't have a whole lot to talk about, so I had to come up with something else to do, and here we are. It's Friday. But happy Friday. Let's go ahead and get into it. So at the calling, top 8 was a pretty easy thing. There was 3 heroes in it. 1 through 6 was Ira, and Ira was pretty much favored in Blitz, from what I heard. Her and Kano seemed to be the 2 strongest, and then Dorinthia throughout it, which actually is shown in the top 8. It's 1 through 6 is Ira, and then it was Dorinthia and Kano. So the 2 that snuck in were the other 2 that I think are kind of favored as heroes going into the weekend. We're not going to go into any real details. Basically, again, Ira dominated. This is her first Roll of Honor, I believe, towards her becoming a living legend, unless BlitzCon counted also. If so, this will be her second on her way. So unless another hero gets introduced, I believe she'll be the first to retire. Unless they either switch the formats up a lot to slow that down. But I believe there's only 3 or 4 events a year that allow them to get a Roll of Honor, so no matter what, she'll be around a little bit. Yeah, so that's basically it. So let me know if you guys wanted to know anything. We can go into deck lists or something like that in a later video if that's something you guys are interested in. But I figured I'd go ahead and go over the deck tech of my pet deck, which is Ira. I have a Blitz deck that I've been working on, and I want to show it to you guys, and maybe go over the better lines and the cards that I think are the most important, and the type of turns that I believe are more important than blocking unless it's important. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get into that. I'm going to go ahead and move the camera. You guys won't see it, but poof. Alright, and we're back. So again, we're going to go over my Blitz deck for Azalea. We're going to use Red Liner. So Azalea's 0 ability is put a card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck. If you do, put the top card of your deck face up in your arsenal. If it's an arrow card, it gains Dominate until end of turn, go again. 0. So Red Liner also costs 0, and it says if you have no cards in your arsenal, put an arrow card from your hand face up in your arsenal, go again. So they work perfectly together. So you can use this to put a card from your hand in your arsenal, and then use her to put the top card in. If it's an arrow, it gets Dominate. As you'll see, most of our arrows will hit with Dominate, and hopefully disable our opponent in one way or another. So these are our weapons and our person. We'll put this up. Now, for our weapon suite, or our equipment suite, I mean, we're going to start with Talismanic Lens. Yes, that should be crossbone or skullbone cross wrap, I believe is what it's called. I don't have it yet. This card's okay. It's definitely not the same. You definitely want that. We're going to follow that up with Fandle's Spring Tunic. Your arrows are cheap. They're 0s and 1s, so this 1 mana every 3rd turn can really matter. We're going to follow that up with a Bullseye's Bracers. This destroy this card. If you have no cards in arsenal, put an arrow card from it face up. It gains +1, go again, and then has Arcane Barrier 1. The weapons that have Arcane Barrier 1 attached to them, I think, are very good. Just in general, even though they don't block the extra damage. Sorry, melee damage. And then finally, Perch Grapplers. It has an action for 2 mana. We can destroy Perch Grapplers, and until end of turn, face up arrow cards from our arsenal, gain go again. Right now, the most I've been able to fire off, I believe, is 4 arrows is my best thing, but that took a decent amount of setup. I think 3 arrows is a solid turn. So anyways, that's our loadout. And now let's go ahead and get to the deck. Now the first couple cards are going to be our setup cards. We're going to start with 2 energy potions. Now these do 2 things. They give you 3 mana if you pitch them, but they also set up a 2 mana instant crack, which can set up for bigger turns. I was running a snapback in here, but I ended up pulling it out as we have a few ways to give us the extra actions, and having too many potions lead to some awkward draws, at least in my experience. So another setup card, and I think this is one of the most important, is 3 of a kind. It's draw 3 cards until end of turn. You may only play cards from your arsenal. This costs 1, so it costs you something, but on our strongest turn, this could be our tunic, and then we have 4 cards plus draw 3. You get rid of this from whether your arsenal or your hand. We'll say your hand because it's probably the strongest. Then you draw 3, so you're up to 6, 7 cards that turn. And our last set, or not our last setup card, one of our last setup cards is Poison the Tips. I'm only running 1 of these. I was running 2, but it's a little awkward because it doesn't actually pump anything. It just causes a block, and if your arrow's not good enough, I mean, they can either not block and discard a card, or they can, you know what I mean? Like, the decision's not that interesting to me. So I only ran 1 of those. And now I think this is the most important card of this deck, and it's Rapid Fire. And this is the card that's going to set up 3 to 4 arrow turns. Until end of turn, arrows get go again. You get to reload, which means you get to put a card from your hand face down in your arsenal, and you get go again. This begins a lot of things. Some of your strongest hands are Rapid Fire out of your arsenal and begin your chains. A couple more setup cards that we're doing. These are pump cards. Increased Attention, which I think is very strong in this deck. This is the red version. It gives it +3. Your next arrow attack +3, and defense reactions can't be played from hand this chain link. Go again. We also are running Take Aim. We're running 1 yellow and 2 reds because I think the card's extremely good. The yellow gives +2. The red is going to give +3 to your ranger attacks, and it reloads. Reload's also a very important mechanic, as you get to use a pump plus set up your arrow shot. I think it's really important, and it was really hard to cut these down to a blitz size thing. So our other pump is Nimblism. It's just a free pump 3 for like everything we have in our deck. So those are our setup cards, and kind of where we're going with the deck is we're going to try to set up a big... The best turn is like a large dominate arrow with a good negative effect for your opponent. So now we'll get into the arrows. This is my least favorite, is Searing Shot, but it's a 4 damage, and if it hits your opponent, they lose 1. So if they don't block it, it's for 5, and that's if you don't pump it. The next is Pathing Helix. This card's actually pretty good. If it hits your opponent, you get to arsenal a card, so you basically get to reload, which, again, I just got on talking about how good reload is for this deck. So, again, an arrow that makes them have to block like 2 cards worth, unless they have a defense reaction, I think is pretty solid. Excuse me. Then next we have Sleep Dart. I actually really like Sleep Dart. It's a 5 damage, so they have to block for 2 unless they don't want to be able to activate their hero next turn. I think that's a very good decision arrow to fire off. If you can give it Dominate, it even does more. It's gonna either deal 5 or whatever they block, but you're almost guaranteed to deal the damage and turn their hero off for the turn. So for the very hero-centric matches, that arrow is actually very potent. Sick'em Shot, running 2 of the red. It's a 4 damage, and it has go again. There's nothing much to say about this. This lets us fire off a second arrow. Again, I believe our strongest turns are multiple arrows. This just allows us to fire a second one out. Our next one is Salvage Shot. Salvage Shot is kind of an endgame arrow, and almost never want to block with this arrow. You want to get this into a loop into your thing. You always want it to be like the last arrow or a dominate arrow or something along those lines to try to squeak 1 damage in so you can put it on the bottom of your deck. And at the end, your end game, if all goes well, should be 2 Savage shots where you get to pitch 1, fire 1, pitch 1, fire 1, and hit every time. And again, hopefully you guys are both at the end game and they won't be able to block that. And this just keeps giving you damage because Azalea's weapon actually doesn't do any damage. So you need arrows. So this is kind of like what we're doing. Maybe it needs another one, but right now we're only running 2 of the reds. We're trying to run as many reds as possible because we want to try to make sure they hit. Now, one of my favorite cards is our dual headshots. This, if it's put into your arsenal, which means it has to be put in, you can't flip it up like with Skullbone Cross Wrap or anything. It has to actually be put in there, but it gets +2. So it's a 4. It goes to a 6, and then any pumps on top of that. If you get to Azalea that, you get that, have 6 with Dominate, which gives you a very good opportunity to deal at least 3 with it. So it's just one of our stronger shots. And then another one of my favorite cards, and one of my favorite foils in the game, is Hamstring Shot, because that pool of blood looks amazing. I actually don't have one in here. I think I took it out because, I don't know, I don't think I'm foiling this deck out, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Anyways, we're doing 2 red of this, and if Hamstring Shot hits a hero, the first attack they do next turn costs an additional mana. You know how tight mana is in this game. It comes down to 1 mana decisions, and this causing something to cost 1 more can really screw up somebody's turn, especially if they're taking damage and you get to do this on your 2nd or 3rd arrow, and then they're taking damage because they're trying to hold a good turn. This thing can be devastating. Followed up by, I believe, our last common arrow, which is Ridge Rider Shot. This with Redliner is a very good combo with Azalea. So this is like my favorite arrow in the common slot. I know I just said my favorite 3 times, but I did that on purpose, my 3 last favorite arrows. But this actually has a good combo because when you put it into your arsenal, so you can Redliner, put it in your arsenal, opt 1. If you like that arrow and want to give it Dominate for 0, you put this on the bottom. Now you set up another opt later in the game, and Azalea, and the arrow that you like will have Dominate to fire off. And then, like, one of the first things we'll do, and I only have one of these endless arrows, so that's why, if you're going to ask, why do I only run one endless arrow? I only have one. I need to finish that, just like I don't have the Skullbone Cross Wraps. But, so giving this Dominate would be very strong because it goes back into your hand as a 4-drop. And it hits for 4. So there's a good chance it hits for 1, it goes back to your hand. If you give your arrows go again, I think you can fire this 3 times with your equipment set up if you have everything. So like 3 times if they don't block, or if you find a way to get this through 2 times, I think you can fire it a 3rd time with your equipment set up. If I'm wrong, let me know. I'm trying to think. Maybe it's only 2 times with your equipment, and you have to have another way to put it back into your arsenal. Either which way. Let's go ahead and move along a little more. We're running 2 Remorseless. This is one of the better cards, and it goes really good with Increased Attention. So if Remorseless is put into your arsenal face up, until end of turn, it gains defensive reactions can't be played from your arsenal. This chain link. If Remorseless hits a hero until the end of their next turn, whenever they play an action card, they lose a life. So it bleeds them a little bit. But it also does, so with Increased Attention, it turns off defense reactions from your arsenal. So if you increase Attention into Remorseless, they can't play any defense reactions, which is a super strong combination of cards. And if you were able to pump that a little bit, you get a lot of things, and now they're incentivized to not try to do, especially like ninjas, they'd be incentivized to not try to do a 4-chain thing because it would cost them 4 life to do that. very, very powerful. The next very, very powerful mythic that we are going to fire off is Red in the Ledger. This is Azalea's specialization. If Red in the Ledger hits a hero, they can't play or activate more than one action during their next turn. This turns off, again, like go-agains, gain action point potions. Again, very strong. It's a 5. If you can set it up off the top of your deck with Azalea, it gets Dominate, which kind of guarantees it'll hit, which turns off big turns for some decks. Again, we're trying to hit them with the arrows that are going to disable what they're trying to do, and maybe we only hit them for 1 or 2, but the whole key is to like really kind of mess with their game plan. Now, one of the other key things is knock the death whistle. I actually think this should be a mythic, but I don't know their exact things. This thing does everything this card wants. It has 3 mana, so it allows us to fire anything. It's Azalea's other specialization, and we get to search our deck for an arrow card, reveal it, shuffle our deck, and put it on top of our deck. That allows us to fire off Azalea, give it Dominate, and shoot it off. So if you have this card, plus like 2 Nimblisms, and we'll say an increased attention, and you go get a 0 card to shoot with Knock the Death Whistle, you can shoot like an 11 Dominate arrow. So this card like is the glue of this deck, in my opinion. And that is all of our attack actions. Now let's get into our defense. And this is only 3 cards, so we're going to make this real quick. First, we're going to start with Take Cover. We're doing red because it's 4 damage. We're not trying to turtle up. We are trying to hit him with arrows. We're not. Again, we only have 2 different cards, 3 cards total. This blocks for 4 and allows us to reload as a defense reaction, which will set up the beginning of our next turn. So if we're lucky enough to only have to fire this off, this goes ahead and starts our chain from arsenal if we had nothing. Like say we had a big turn last turn, we drew 4, and now we're sitting with an empty arsenal and 3 decent cards. And Take Cover. You use Take Cover, you get the load up, and it could set up a bigger turn than normal because you don't have to waste like Red Line or your bracers to get it in there. And our final card is 1 single Feign Death. It pitches for 2, which is mostly... that looked really crazy off that curve. I need a better webcam. Excuse me. So decks that are trying to hit you more than once, this is... I mean, you just don't die. And sometimes that's all that matters in this game. I was running 2, but again, I'm trying to cut back on the defense, and I want to try to be as strong going forward and really let the arrows kind of mess with them as much as possible. I really hope she gets something else, but Azalea's a blast to play. So this is my deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. If you guys have any opinions about it or anything I should add, take away, please let me know in the comments. Like, share. I appreciate you guys as always, and I'll see you guys next week.